Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here with you today. Hello to my fellow graduate university folks who are here. So I've been at Brown for 10 years. I right now sit in the Swearer Center for Public Service. Um, and for those who know Digital Collegium, which is a great national higher ed digital organization. I work with them in their co-chair of their marketing and communications group over there as well. And I'm really excited to be here at Rick. I graduated from Rick, and this is probably my third time back on campus since I graduated, which was like 17 years ago, and I live in Rhode Island. So it's funny. Just it's nice to be back here. I don't clearly get back here much. But as I was thinking about my time here at Rick and being with you all today, I was remembering how when I was here at Rick, Facebook had just started. And at the time, it was for college students, so you couldn't sign up for Facebook unless you had a college email. And I said that to some of the students I work with, and they were mortified, and because they don't even use Facebook anymore. So it aged me with them for sure. But it really gave me a moment to think about, and we know this, but like how much social has not just grown, but just skyrocketed and changed the landscape of everything, our entire culture and society and news and work and all of that. So it was really just a moment that allowed me to reflect on that. And I think social media obviously wasn't something we talked about in the classroom here. So now that I work on a college campus and work in higher ed, something that I didn't know then, certainly before I was in the industry itself, but the people who work in digital spaces in higher ed keep our campuses afloat way more than people realize. And I think way more than people who aren't in the work will ever really know. I think about it if someone goes to our website, they don't outwardly say, this website is amazing. I totally trust them with my future. They don't say that, right? But that doesn't mean that trust isn't being built or fractured every time they come to our website or come to our social media, because before they go on a campus tour or before their parents are looking at, the admissions office, before a staff member applies for a job or comes to campus, or even a community partner comes to an event, they're looking at our website or our social media and they're asking themselves, do I belong here? Do I trust you? And do I believe you and what you're saying? And so I really look at websites and our sort of digital spaces as the front door to the institution. And increasingly, and as Mike mentioned, I think people are showing up with complicated feelings about higher ed. These are just some headlines I took that we've all seen, various of versions of these. Confidence has been declining over the last few years. I think I've heard we're on a bit of an upswing, but it's still not great compared to where it used to be. Skepticism has risen. The federal government has gotten involved. And yet the expectations for clarity and transparency, and I think humanity, have really never been higher. And I think it's a strange paradox because public trust has been eroding over the last couple of years, but I don't think we've ever had more power to shape how our institutions are understood because people are looking at us differently. And I don't think that's a marketing challenge or just a marketing challenge. I think it's a civic challenge because universities are more than sort of academic factories. And I say that I'm in an R1 research university, but I think at their best, universities and colleges, they're civic actors. That's how we talk about it where I am. They're places that bring people together to learn, to create, to contribute, and to question. And I think the digital spaces that we maintain, that we build, that we secure, they're part of the civic infrastructure of the university. And every decision that we make, big and small, all of it signals who we are and what we value. And I think it's not about just writing code or copy. I think we're helping shape identity, belonging, and trust at our universities. And I think that's true wherever you sit within the university, whether it's a small department or it's in the highest, university communications or the news division, wherever it may be. I think we're all impacting our infrastructure. And I think that's the work. I think that's the power of the work. And this morning I want to explore some questions. And the overarching one is, what does it mean to build a university website and digital ecosystem as an act of civic trust? Because when we understand our digital spaces, not just as a product, but as public good, I think the work changes and I think the responsibility deepens. And so if that's the paradox, that we're building a front door for people who may not trust the bones of the house, the question becomes, how do we design and steward these digital spaces in ways that rebuild belief, signal belonging, and demonstrate trust? For me, the answer comes down to kind of 4 pieces: trust, identity, experience, and stewardship. And they all depend on each other. So everything starts with trust. I think we all know that and could agree on that. When trust is lost, purpose becomes suspect. I think when people stop believing what we say, or worse, they stop listening altogether. In today's world, we know that news is 24 hours a day. The content is 24 hours a day. And we can't control what other people are saying about us. But we can control decisions, conscious decisions that we make that are in the interest of building trust. And then once trust is on the table, we can communicate who we are. Your website, it's not just a directory of offices, it's really a declaration of values. And it tells people who we are, how we show up, and for our communities. And identity only matters if people can feel it. So the choices we make in UX and accessibility, in language and imagery, those all shape the relationship that people form with us. It goes back to, to those questions. Do I feel seen? Do I belong here? And none of this sticks without care over time. Governance, maintenance, workflows, that's what sustains credibility. It's how we keep our integrity intact when our institutions evolve or drift. So the chain sort of looks like this. It's trust enables identity. Identity shapes experiences. Experience demands stewardship, and stewardship protects trust. It's a loop. It's not linear. Despite my last slide, it is a loop. And when one of these is at risk or falters, the whole chain is at risk. And digital teams influence every one of these decisions and every one of these pieces. I think early on in our careers, especially, again, this time in particular, I think is critical. But we sort of kind of come in and we're here to publish content and we're here to build components. And we are, but in some way, we're really stewarding the narrative legitimacy of our institutions. And I think it's a big responsibility. So as I said from the beginning, websites and social media have become the front door to the institution. We think about, again, the campus tours. We think about the admissions office, interviews of staff members. But today, most people meet us here. They meet us online. And the website, and certainly as we know now, our social media channels, these are not just marketing surfaces, they're identity surfaces. And I think our digital presence in the university and at our schools, for most people, is our university. It is what we're putting out online is who we are to a lot of people. So if our digital presence is the front door, then we have to ask, what does the doorway signal about who we are? And what story are people walking into? Storytelling has always been part of institutional life. I feel like I've been talking about storytelling in my own area, my own university, more than ever. Because I think, again, people today are longing for that connection and stories of humanity and connection. So I think when there's so much polarization, so much lack of trust in everything, including higher ed, storytelling allows us to continue to orient people to our institutions. And so people are coming in, I work with students, for any of you who do, they are coming in way more informed and engaged than ever. And I think that is also true for our donors, for our alumni, for our staff, for our faculty. I think it's, again, you can't say it enough. It's a different time right now. And I think if all the things that we're putting out in storytelling are, we're great, look at us, look at all these amazing things we're doing, I think you're going to lose people. That is, rather than impressing them, you're going to turn them away. Because I think today, people, they're just tired of that. And so how do we build trust instead of contributing to the erosion or potential erosion of it? I have 8 considerations that are all tied together. But before I go through these, I do want to acknowledge there does have to be some level of look at us, we're free, right? And that can be in different places in the university. That could be in your news division. That could be in your president's office, your provost's office. That's anywhere you work. That is a reality. There has to be some level of that. But it can't mostly be that or only that. So I'll go through these fairly quickly. But leading with purpose, not prestige. It's okay to tell the good stories. In fact, I think it's more important than ever. But to do it with purpose, ask, why does this story matter to anyone beyond us? If the only answer is it makes us look good, that you're gonna lose your audience. And if the purpose is the why does this matter? Why will anyone care about this other than us? Then the next step is looking at who's most affected. So centering people and partners, not just the institution. Who's at the heart of the work? Whose lives, whose neighborhoods, whose ecosystems, whatever it may be, are changing because of this work. But centering people isn't enough unless we're also elevating their voices, not just our interpretation of their experiences. And so reflecting lived experience, inviting students and faculty and staff and community members, whomever, again, is affected by this, to speak as experts in their own experience. This is something my area in particular, we work a lot at the Swearer Center for Public Service with the connection between Brown and the city of Providence and certainly the surrounding neighborhoods, but also Rhode Island. We're a small state, so Rhode Island as a whole. And we really talk about and think about, you can have a faculty member who is doing research and they have this grant and they go out into the community and say, I have this thing, I need this from you. And then they're gone. So what we've been working really hard to think about, and certainly in our storytelling, is how can we identify what the community actually needs and then match them with someone from our university and treat them as the experts in their field that they are, because they're the ones in the work every day. And I think that is true with students. I think that is true with staff members, whoever is at the heart of the story or part of the story, treating them and allowing them into the story. And again, it's not about our interpretation of their experience, but bringing them into it. And then once we prioritize people and voice, the next step is to be honest about the work itself. So a real impact is not ever really clean and tidy, right? And so I think acknowledging challenges and what's still in progress, I think is okay. And when we tell the truth about the complexity, we can pair it with evidence, and that's going to help deepen trust. When you pair human story, relevant data, it gives credibility and meaning to your story. But even good stories, we know, can fall flat and disconnected from what's happening today. And it's hard sometimes to find that balance. So speaking to the moment, silence can be risky. I think when things happen, students in particular, but communities and other folks around the university, they want to know, do you see us? Do you care? Do you stand for something? You can't comment on every crisis. I'm a firm believer that, an actual official statement should only come from the president or, whomever is designated in that time. I don't think small areas should be the ones to be putting out public statements. But what we can do, and no matter what department we are in, is we can publish stories about our values and our commitments. And so you can clarify your values by asking, does this story come to that? Does it come back to that? And when people feel seen in the present, they're more likely to want to participate in what comes next. And I think you can pair this one with, reflecting lived experience to invite people in. But they're going to want to have to be engaged with you. And so again, that's building trust and building relationships. And I think, again, what it also comes down to, like I said before, when we tell stories of collaboration, not institutional saviorism, we reinforce shared purpose. If the institution is always the hero, people will stop believing it. And again, there's room for that in certain ways, but again, it can't be everything. And so really what it comes down to, what all of these kind of culminate into, is moving from telling stories about ourselves to telling stories about our values and practice. It's showing more than saying. And it all comes back to trust and building trust and relationships with people. So I'll give you 2 examples. These are made up. These are not real examples, but in this instance, the university has been working on a new community health initiative in the community. So version 1, which could be a completely true and typical way to think about this or say it, is, our university opened a new community health clinic. We're proud to expand access and provide top-tier care. It's not wrong, but it's centering the university. And it is assuming trust. And it also has the implication that we did this for you. So another way to look at it could be, local residents identified traveling across town for care was a barrier. We opened a clinic on their bus line, co-run with local nurses and advocates. In its first year, we supported 480 neighborhood patients, many of whom hadn't seen a provider in over 3 years. That's just 2 more sentences than the first one. But what it did was, it starts with the purpose, right? So why do we have this new community health initiative? It starts with, this is what the community identified as an issue. It centers the residents, not the university. It elevates the residents' reality, which is transportation barriers in this particular instance. In partnership, it's co-run, it's not provided. And it includes a simple impact measure. So in the second version, the university is a partner, not sort of the hero of the story. The story becomes, we listened and we did it with you. And that's trust building. And again, this is just from two sentences we added, there's another sentence. So it's just total reframe, right? And how we're thinking about these things. I'll do one more example. So a university STEM department runs a K-12 outreach program aimed at encouraging more young people to pursue science and engineering. And this is based on a true story in Providence. The instinct may be to tell the story like this. We're inspiring the next generation of scientists through our hands-on STEM outreach program. Again, true, and it even signals passion and purpose, but it's vague. So it, again, prioritizes the institution rather than the actual program and its effects. So if we reframe it, again, we're adding one sentence, and now it's last year, 240 middle schoolers participated in our engineering workshop. After the program, 72% reported they could see themselves pursuing a STEM career, increasing from 38% at the start of the program. So again, what changed? The people are visible. The students are the center of the story. We have evidence that supports the narrative. We see outcomes, not just the activity itself. The impact is measurable. And this may not be true for every story, but is there a before and after shift that we can talk about? And the meaning is clear. It demonstrates a tangible benefit. And again, the difference is trust building. It recognizes that the activity alone is not impact, but that the credibility comes when stories are paired with data, if that's available. And so when we do that, we allow audiences to understand that not just what we did, but why it matters. So if intentional storytelling lays the sort of emotional groundwork for trust, then our next question becomes, how do people experience the story? Because I think it's one thing to say, we value belonging and accessibility and community. It's another for people to actually feel those values when they navigate our sites or our social media channels. And this is where design enters the picture as a civic practice. I'm a designer by trade and at heart, so I think about this a lot, and I believe so strongly that design is not neutral, that the way we navigate or we structure navigation, the language we choose for buttons, the images we elevate, all of it signals who is welcome at our university, consciously or subconsciously. Good design asks, who are we making this for, and who might we be leaving out? Because if someone can't access the information, or they can't see themselves in our imagery or our language, or they can't successfully complete a task, then that could be sending them a message. I think accessibility it's not just compliance, and I feel like accessibility has been talked about wonderfully more and more in the last few years. But it's if we're saying everyone is welcome through the front door, then everyone has to be able to get in and access. So this is where UI and UX come in. For those who might not be familiar, and I'm not the expert here. I'm sure there are people in this room who are much more adept at talking about UI and UX in detail than I certainly am. But if UX is the house, UI is the furniture that makes it feel like home. And UX is not about efficiency, it's about orientation. It's a clear path that says you belong here, we thought about you. When we treat design as civic practice, we move from asking what looks good to what communicates belonging, and what communicates we want you here, we're thinking about you. And then the visual layer doesn't have to suffer to achieve that at all. Every color, every content block, every alt tag, they become acts of hospitality. That's how I'd like to think about it. It's how we can help belonging show up on screens. But it's not a one-time decision. It is a commitment. And if design helps people feel welcome today, who protects that welcome over time? How do we ensure all that hard work lasts? And we do that through governance. And this really goes back to the stewarding piece I was talking about earlier. Governance can be tough because the people who are not doing the governance really can see it as a constraint or as us being controlling. When in reality, and I can understand that, I can. But in reality, it's really a consideration of our users, and we have the responsibility to govern what is happening on our digital spaces. And it really, at its core, governance is about clarity, care, and continuity, right? What are our standards? Who holds which responsibilities? And how is that knowledge sustained over time? I think we certainly all know too, there's turnover. And so it's also, how can we protect this information for the next team or the next person that's also going to be taking on and be responsible for it? It's how we protect the narrative of our areas and our schools. And it's what we've worked so hard to build. So it's how we I think governance, it's how we ensure that our sites continue, again, to talk about our values and ensure what the messaging that people are seeing visually, through storytelling, all of it. And strong governance says our values don't expire. They're practiced and applied by many hands, because I think everyone in this room knows, like, this work can't happen in a vacuum. And this is where, Drupal teams, content strategists, comms teams quietly do some of the most important and often, I think, underappreciated civic work on campus. It's the work that our colleagues don't realize that we do day in and day out. It's the work that helps keep our institutions afloat. And the web is now where most people meet us first. We are answering these questions. Our visitors and followers have choice by choice with all the decisions that we're making every day. They're asking, do I belong here? Do I believe you? Can I trust you? And you all and all of us who work in these spaces, we're not just keeping systems running. We are shaping how the public understands our institutions. And I just implore all of us, myself included, to continue to build digital spaces that earn trust with people that are coming. So thank you very much. That's me. Anytime, I welcome email, my LinkedIn. I'm always happy to talk about anything, but thank you for having me. And I think if anyone has questions, certainly I welcome any questions. Yeah.
So your point about accessibility is excellent. And where I'm going with this is design system. So like in our design system, accessibility is an absolute fundamental core of it. And what you're talking about, kind of thinking beyond accessibility with design systems, do you have thoughts in terms of how, like, in terms of communication and values, what are the things that we should be thinking about in viewing into our design systems?
Say that last part again, sorry.
Are there, in terms of what you're talking about in your presentation, are there things that we should be thinking about in our design system beyond accessibility to help support what you're talking about?
I mean, I think it's all, I have to be at this microphone. I think it's all connected. So I think it's accessibility. I know certainly at Brown this has become, and as it should be, a very important piece of everything. It's even including, and others in the room may probably even speak to this more specifically, but it's making things required, right? If I'm working on my website, I have 3 to 4 websites that I upkeep at the university. And, from the highest, university communications, the things, even implementing, this is required, right? You cannot save this web page if you do not put in every alt tag, as an example. Are there requirements that you can put in for governance in your own areas that can contribute to the accessibility piece? But I think so much of it is, I think it's all connected, so I think it is in the imagery that we're using. I think it's in the language that we're using, when we can use plain language, inclusive language. I think it's all connected. Yeah, please.
Governance is definitely something I think, it's just come over time for me, that it has become such an important focus for me. And I'm wondering if you or others in the room, it's been surprising for me to find how much IT has to drive governance, and not governance of IT necessarily, or governance of the website, but governance of systems and how they're used and who has access to what. And I always figured, I think maybe it was a naivete of mine, early on in my career, that would come from administration. And I don't know if it's just my perspective and where I've worked, but it's been surprising to me how much I find myself always like driving governance and the need for it just overall at the organization.
That's a great point. Yeah, I do think governance, a good point too, that governance does come over time too. But I do think part of it does depend on where you are. In my experience, I don't know, again, if others feel similarly. But I think that is true. Colleges have a lot of systems, and there's a lot of platforms, and there's a lot of different teams and departments working on those. And I would say it is, I think, rare for the administration end to be involved. It really does seem like IT. And I would say at Brown, our university communications team I feel very strong in governance, separate or in addition to and in partnership with IT. But I would be interested as well if other people have experiences, because I do think to your point, there are so many systems. Yeah, please.
I think it's largely just, I'm talking a little bit about this in my talk later, but everything is so decentralized, and the authority to buy a system or a tool, it does vary from institution. Sometimes there's no oversight or governance around admissions buying a thingamajig that then they might be like, hey, we spent $100,000 on this. What's it called? Like, you implement it, like what? But also I think that IT historically, for obvious reasons, has been like the tech center. Like 30 years ago, communications was not a technology center, but now increasingly Marcom is more of a technological team. So I know I've seen, as a consultant both in-house, seen that tension there at times. And I think that there's a lot of those sort of legacy relics of like organizational structures from way back when, and like, how IT had existed, then like a web team appeared in like 2000 or whatever. And they had the jockey for, to own stuff or whatnot. So I feel like we're still reckoning with so much of decisions that were made 20, 30 years ago. And because higher ed is higher ed, it's hard to evolve from that. Even if it makes total sense on paper, it's the culture sort of creates a lot of friction around reasonable evolutions. That would encourage better governance.
Yeah. Yes.
I would just say to Swimit's point that we feel the need for governance most acutely because we're the expert of these systems. But to your point earlier, we have to really engage with our other stakeholders, because we just do governance because we know, like, our minds are going to explode from governance. That we have to have it, but at the same time, if we're not engaging and figuring out how we're going to do this, we're just going to be seen as like gatekeepers or prison wardens or whatever. We're just going to drive the people we're trying to work with away. So I think I work personally and trying to like, hey, guess what? We really need some processes with you guys. We want to do it with you because we don't want to come across as like, oh, you're just the mean people in IT. But I think we have to drive it because we're the people we're the experts. We're the people who understand the needs the most. So people have other thoughts, I'd love to hear from you. We're on this journey, it sounds like maybe.
To respond to that and build on it a little bit, I mean, I'm in the middle of like building a policy and guidelines site, right? So we've got documents everywhere. And definitely meeting with stakeholders across the university, but very much feel like, I'm driving the entire process alone. And to constantly try to explain to administration the idea of governance, it is not about restricting people, right? It is about us wanting to be able to support them and the systems that we're bringing on board. And we can't properly do that if they're not onboarded already. It's like you're coming asking for support for a system. We don't even know you have that system. Like, how do we don't have access to it? How do we begin to help you? So
I mean, I think a lot of it's around risk, just that they have no idea. And because there are all sorts of things like, hey, that happened, it's not very risky. But there are other things like this happened and it's a massive risk for the university. Stakeholders should know the issue. Just like having those conversations in a way before it's too late to be like, okay, we got this elephant, It's challenging.
Yeah, I do think I genuinely think governance is one of the hardest pieces because, to your point, and I said that it is, as people think of it as like, you're just trying to control it. Can't you just like, let me have this system and leave us alone? Like, we know what it's for, but there's so much more involved than that. I mean, there is security, there is, information sharing, like whatever it may be. I think governance is one of the most important things and one of the most difficult in my experience. And it sounds like others' experience.
We've been exploring controlling governance at point of purchase because when units are left to their own devices, they can go out and buy whatever thing they want, implement it. We're pretty decentralized, but if we can govern at point of purchase and say, no, you can't buy this tool because it's not accessible or whatever, at the procurement level, that's what we're starting to explore now because it's just untenable otherwise.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's great. Yeah.
You talked about storytelling and reframing it to not what the university necessarily is like, this is what we're great at, but this is how we help the communities. I think a lot of people in this room, we're responsible for building the tools and systems that allow our universities to put out that message. But we're not necessarily in control of guiding how to reframe that storytelling.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on how can we be good stewards and like kind of push towards that reframing of what we're good at and how we're expressing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I sort of, I think one is, are there components on the website that allow for versions of storytelling? I think one of the things, I want to say fairly recently, someone can correct me, at Brown, but one of the things that was implemented recently was sort of having vertical reels being a component that can be on our websites. And I think that has been a great addition as one example of, again, if a student, prospective student or whomever is coming on our websites, are there things you can implement that, because we know people also take stories or think about stories differently. Some people want to see a video, some people want to read a news story, some people want to listen to a podcast. I think it's making sure that there are options for all of those so that folks are getting the stories how you're getting them, but that they can be put into components on the website or whatever it may be that different audiences will watch or will read, and making it just, I think we've talked about this so much, is I actually run, it's only in its second year, it's a community storytelling fellowship, and I keep it a small cohort. This year I have 6 students because their storytelling project can be any medium. It can be an audio series, it can be a documentary style, it can be a news story, a journalism piece, it can be an oral history, whatever it is, because I don't want to put restrictions on them, because I think storytelling can be so nuanced. And again, the way people prefer to take in stories and to prefer to hear the news it's different for everyone. So I do think having components on the websites that allow for different types of storytelling will help reach more people.
I would just say in response to that as well, more in response to your question, Mike, is that one of the things we can do on the technical end is that having description and help text for fields be written from the point of view of the communications or editorial need, rather than that this is the technical field, this is how you use this field, these are the limits, but have that be baked in so that every time a content editor is interacting with the components or interacting with the content types, when they're adding in content, they're seeing what the editorial intention of that or communications intention of that field or that component is. And so that's sort of like one of the things I know that on a lot of projects I've worked on, it's sort of the last thought is all the help text and the descriptions of all the components, but really working with the communications teams to try and come up with good language for what those things are and how they should be used.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
It's kind of like with the alt text field on images, not saying describe the image, but telling them like give the context of this image to help them how to write it.
Yeah.
I would also add to that, like, technical piece, yes, but I also don't think that we should completely negate the fact that we can add to the storytelling as well. And I think that that's where we bring our personal experience to the team. I largely been the only woman on a team, to at a university that is primarily always trying to draw more women to the university, to be able to provide that perspective. And maybe, it could be, your sons, your fathers. We have a manager who's, nearing retirement, to add that experience of like, what you're doing is difficult for me to read, so to bring that, whatever personal experience you have with the web, that could be, not being overlooked by whoever's making those decisions, design or storytelling.
Yeah. I ran into that a lot too. I think I have worked in university departments, academic departments, and that's a challenge with faculty too a lot. Like if those who have worked with faculty, especially the older faculty who have no sort of care, consideration, because maybe they don't have to, on communications or, the system side of it, it's just they want what they want. And I think that in part can be a generational thing too, to your point, even in people who are maybe it's close to retiring. I think, and I say that in the sense of there's been such a shift in the digital sphere. And I think there are things that, as a 40-year-old, that the students talk about or do that I have no clue, really. And I think that's a whole separate conversation of like, on college campuses, this is really true. There are people who are in positions for 40 years and have so much important institutional knowledge. And then there are people coming in out of college, right? Or even in, we have someone who was hired recently who came to Brown, right? And is now working there. And I think it's in the tech world, I think we see it maybe in a bit of a different way, but it's how can we bridge all of the different generations that are working today? Because I think the institutional knowledge that the folks who have been there for a long time is super important, and just as important as the things that people new will come in with, but how can we bridge them in a way that I've seen can make it more tension filled than productive. But I think that's a whole different conversation. Yeah, please.
This could be a potentially complicated or amorphous answer, so maybe I'll phrase it more like, what is your favorite? But I had a question about how you gauge your metrics of success when you've changed your storytelling. So do you have a favorite example of a time where you're like, I've noticed that we made this change and I'm getting XYZ feedback, or I'm polling this population and whatever's your favorite, because I know there's probably so many different ways that you get that information.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, just as an example, that I think really changed the course for how I and the team were thinking about storytelling was we have a community partnership area, and they literally pulled the community in the surrounding neighborhoods of Brown and the all of Rhode Island to say, what are you seeing as the higher needs in your community? What are you seeing so what are the community identified priorities? And we will build our storytelling around those. We will, as I'm building out, maybe hopefully a semester's work of stories with the team, it's okay, we talked about public health. Have we talked about, K through 12 schools? Have we talked about, because there are so many programs where students are in these programs, like our university students that are through a fellowship or a program or through volunteering, whatever it may be. And so one of the very first things we did was ask the community, and then we have shaped not all, but so much of our storytelling around their answers.
And do you have a method for managing a cadence of like reaching out or polling again to make sure that you're still on message or that message or needs haven't changed?
Yeah, and I think that's an example is we sort of have been, we did it about, I would say the last time was maybe 2 years ago, and we've done it because of this context right now of just the country and things like that. We have done it differently this year, because now, especially for community, and community partners and community members, things have shifted so much for them. And now it's become trickier, I feel like, as not just the storyteller, but as a university sort of representative of how can we tell these stories with potentially, new eyes on us, new parameters. It's been a tricky and difficult line more recently. But to your point, yes, we do think, I would say we're thinking every 2 years has sort of been the general cadence, and also looking at, who responded. Are there others we can reach out to that will widen the pool of issue areas, for lack of a better term.
And lastly, on what you just said, do you have an example of like a shift you've made in the last year that was more challenging that you're proud of or felt was really successful?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot more conversations, I would say, than ever before with sort of my VP of like, I think we can talk about this. I think we can say this, but others, even within our department or my team, are sort of like, yeah, I don't know if we can say that. I think there's been a lot more of that. That's been really challenging, and really talking through what's okay and what is not okay. And the other thing we've really been trying to be conscious of, and I think this would be my answer, is if we're storytelling about a community partner or about an issue, we ask them if they want to be named. We ask them if we'll even show them the piece to say, are you comfortable with it being reflected this way? Because we know that there are more consequences. And again, it's about decentering us. We know from the Brown University end, like, what pretty much, for the most part, feels okay, but we also want to be respectful of them, and them being a nonprofit, them being in the community and relying on grants, whatever it may be. So I think the biggest shift is we've always been, and I've always been sort of thoughtful and respectful about this, but a much deeper thoughtfulness of asking their permission and gauging their comfortable place with
Sounds
the
like
story.
a lot more direct communication has been helpful.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Great work.
Yeah, thank you.
Another one. Kind of related to that, but then also what you were talking about, like what the students are coming in with, and you don't understand what they're saying or how they're dealing with stuff, or even like bringing reels onto, let's say, your website for storytelling. How have you gone about, or do you have any recommendations on how to go about evaluating where we need to put out these messages, where we need to tell our stories, since it changes so much? Like you talked at the beginning, Facebook, when it first came out, you had to be a college student to be on there, right? So universities weren't putting messages on Facebook. Now we do, but we're obviously moving off that because no one uses Facebook. How do you evaluate where you should put out that message so that we can consider what technologies we need to invest in?
I mean, I think one thing that I do, I would actually say fairly regularly, I have someone on my team in particular who's really passionate about data and analytics, which is really wonderful. And it's really identifying each social media channel, our website, anything else. We have a couple of platforms and systems that we use. And it's identifying, it's getting the data and analytics on them, sort of who's coming to Instagram. I can tell you just from my Instagram is current and prospective students. We haven't gotten a TikTok. I sort of have been really, the university has one, but like my specific area, we haven't ventured there. So for us, students, incoming perspective, and I would say our community partners and neighboring folks, get us an Instagram. We got off X. We have not implemented Blue Sky either. We sort of wanted to ride the wave to see if it would stick. So we didn't get on Blue Sky, but Facebook, I would say, is probably our least. It's our last thought of all of them. I'd say LinkedIn has been increasingly popular, both including students, which was shocking to us. But I think especially students as they're getting ready for the professional world, they're really starting to get on LinkedIn and engage on LinkedIn. And certainly I think other areas in the university, because that's also, cross communication across especially big universities is important. So we also look at what are other university departments on the most and resharing our content or others' content. So a huge part of it for us is identifying who is on every single thing we have, and we will tailor messaging to every single one if we have to. So I may have, one story and I'll apply it 7 different ways based on who the projected audience is. So the website comes into play with that. I would say the website we would consider either I think the website even goes down to page by page, right? So we have, our website as a whole, maybe we consider public facing, but if I know, we have 13 fellowships and it's going to be a mix of people who are either already at Brown or students who already, right? So it really comes down, I really go by I really think about every single experience and who's coming to that thing.
I'm curious in this conversation about social, one thing that we haven't paid any attention to, but all of a sudden seems to be becoming very important is Reddit, which is signed deals with Google and OpenAI. And that they seem to be huge in the space of how information is surfacing in the AI tools.
Yes, I have heard that too, and I have not personally experienced or been in a lot of those conversations other than also hearing about it. I don't know if others have. I welcome your thoughts too, but I have also heard that. It has become and I think that's the thing too, is it's a thing so quickly, right? Like all of a sudden it's like people are on Reddit and now that's like So that's the thing I think, especially with comms and tech, is like you can't just be up to date. Like you have to be ready, because once something catches, it sets fire. So I think that's the other consideration that I think other folks, again, sort of outside of the comms or tech world, is like that they don't appreciate, is really having to stay on top of all of these things because they grow so fast. Yeah.
And I would just say, like, one other thing I've heard is that that's very true, and also like media coverage. So I think about teams like a lot of people in this room or teams that I've been on, where it's like we have like the digital team over here and like PR media relations, like in a little room down the hall doing whatever they do. But I think that you think about the role of being aware of what's happening on Reddit. That's like media monitoring, basically. It's not just watching posts anymore, it's also reading Reddit and whatnot. And how what press coverage your school earns is going to come back into those AI overviews. So it creates a need for more internal alignment across all the teams. It's no longer like, oh, media relations is not relevant to me. Actually, it is. And all the lines between what was, I remember when I used to work at the Boston Building, it was like bricks and clicks, and it was like never to make shall meet. And that doesn't exist anymore. Or if people might think it still does, but it actually doesn't. Everything's blurring, and everyone has to be aware of what everyone's doing and respect it and work together and see where those connection points are if we're all going to move forward and be able to catch those waves when they come and be attentive to these opportunities. So I think it's just, we don't know, a month from now we'll be talking about something else, right? And we're only going to be most ready for it if all of the teams are working. And that comes from leadership, right? It's helping make sure that all the teams are aware of what each other's doing, educated on, talking, collaborating, planning, working together.
Yeah, everything. It's hard not to feel like everything's siloed, like all different areas. To your point, and I agree. I think more than ever we need the cross communication, cross training, the collaboration. Agreed. Yeah.
So I was going to say, when you were talking about the social media, it's interesting because, so I work for Brown University Health. My daughter is actually a public health and neuroscience major at Syracuse University. And I've watched her use of social media from when she was like, me fighting her. I was like, no, you shouldn't have it now. And it's funny because she's active, like a lot of college kids, on Snapchat, mostly Snapchat and TikTok. And she, in the past 2 years, she's graduating this year, had gotten a LinkedIn profile, and she's pretty active on that. Mostly on it watching stuff. She doesn't really share, but she also, in the last few years, got a Facebook profile. She lurks. Kind of like how my 80-year-old mother got an Instagram profile so she could lurk and watch things, like into the post. She's learned to comment to everyone's picture, like on stuff, hi, so-and-so, blah, 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 love mom. But so for college kids, so in terms of social media, catering like what you post to who's on the platform. Like, I'm almost 50. I'm on Facebook. I like to read things. And that's I've noticed where a lot of like the Syracuse University parents are as well, commenting and discussing things. And then I know my daughter's like, she's not always on those Facebook pages because they're for the parents, but she watches, and then we'll be having a conversation and she'll mention something that I know was on. I know she's on Facebook, but she doesn't comment on it. So you don't always know who's on there either. Like if they're not,
That's true.
they're
Yeah.
not commenting.
Yes.
She very rarely posts on anything except for TikTok.
Yeah. No, I think that is a great point. I think we can I think as much as the data will tell us.
Yeah, like what they're sharing or what they're
Yeah.
commenting on, that doesn't mean that they're not there.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yep.
Build on to Erica's point about Reddit. I was thinking that in my head as you were bringing it up. AI loves unbiased opinion, unbiased data. The other thing AI loves, which people is great at, is structured data as well. So that's like what we have kind of in our, everyone kind of has in the back pocket is that Drupal is actually, I think, going forward, can be at the leading edge of that. But for Reddit, AI, there's seen some statistics out there. AI will go to Reddit, I think, like answers are like in between 60 and 70% of the time because it sees that as the unbiased opinion compared to like the university website or any other business you're running.
Yeah.
So just interesting to think about how it's going about giving its answers.
Yes, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Which means we have less control of the message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I've been really interested in learning more about AI because and I think it's great that we recently hired a provost for AI, even at the school, and I think again, I think it came so quickly, and I'm very interested to continue to learn about all the ways that AI, from a storytelling and messaging and all of that standpoint, is controlling the narrative because everyone is, I think certainly students especially, but are using it and getting information from it as in lieu of Google search or things like that. People are using AI in that way. So
We have a talk on that later this afternoon.
I'll
Actually.
be there. Excellent.
All right, I'm gonna cut it off there with that. Let's give her a round of applause. What a wonderful, and great engagement afterwards too. All right. We just heard great presentation and great questions. Now I'm gonna give you all questions. I didn't know I had animations on here. So for this, we're going to do table breakout discussions. I'm going to ask you three to leave this table and join one of the other ones because the fuller the table, the better. So the way this works, we have 25 minutes for discussions. I'm going to give you questions related to what was just presented, on civic good and stuff like that. And then you can talk with each other. And these are also centered around Drupal as well. And we have about 7 minutes for each question. So that you can have time to discuss it, share ideas. I'll tell you when the new question's up there. I have timers set up. So your first question for civic trust in the web is: in a crisis at institutions, how can or should the website help build trust with the public? What part does Drupal play in this? So I'll start the timer. You can discuss.
That's right.
I'm gonna hold that little comment.
On the website, emergency lights that spin. Yeah, blinking. Oh, really?
So what's the price for like? Hey, we have the data respond and I just thought it was.
Messaging is important. I also think from an IT perspective and dealing with crisis, having a website that where it can be quickly right there is that flexibility to put a message out. At the top of the website. I know actually what's been talking about our site. We've said it so that it goes over to
incoming perspective, and I would say our community partners and neighboring folks get us an Instagram. We got off X. We have not implemented Blue Sky either. We sort of wanted to ride the wave to see if it would stick. So we didn't get on Blue Sky, but Facebook, I would say, is probably our last thought of all of them. I'd say LinkedIn has been increasingly popular, both including students, which was shocking to us. But I think especially students, as they're getting ready for the professional world, they're really starting to get on LinkedIn and engage on LinkedIn. And certainly, I think other areas in the university, because that's also, cross communication across especially big universities is important. So we also look at what are other university departments on the most and resharing our content or others' content. So a huge part of it for us is identifying who is on every single thing we have and we will tailor messaging to every single one if we have to. So I may have, one story and I'll apply it 7 different ways based on who the projected audience is. So the website comes into play with that. I would say the website we would consider either I think the website even goes down to page by page, right? So we have, our website as a whole, maybe we consider public facing, but if I know, we have 13 fellowships and it's going to be a mix of people who are either already at Brown or students who already, right? So it really comes down, I really go by I really think about every single experience and who's coming to that thing.
I'm curious in this conversation about social, one thing that we haven't paid any attention to, but all of a sudden seems to be coming very important is Reddit, which is signed deals with Google and OpenAI. And that they seem to be huge in the space of how information is surfacing in the AI tools.
Yes, I have heard that too, and I have not personally experienced or been in a lot of those conversations other than also hearing about it. If others have, I welcome your thoughts too, but I have also heard that. It has become and I think that's the thing too, is it's a thing so quickly, right? Like all of a sudden it's like people are on Reddit and now that's like, so that's the thing I think, especially with comms and tech, is like you can't just be up to date, like you have to be ready, because once something catches, it sets fire. So I think that's the other consideration that I think other, folks, again, sort of outside of the comms or tech world is like, that they don't appreciate is really having to stay on top of all of these things because they grow so fast. Yeah.
And I would just say, like, one other thing I've heard is that that's very true. And also like media coverage. So I think about teams like maybe a lot of people in this room or teams that I've been on where it's like we have like the digital team over here and like PR, media relations is like in a little room down the hall doing whatever they do. But I think that you think about the role of being aware of what's happening on Reddit. It's like media monitoring basically. It's not just watching posts anymore, it's also read Reddit and whatnot. And what press coverage your school earns is going to come back into those AI overviews. So it just it creates a need for more internal alignment across all the teams. Because it's no longer being, media relations is not relevant to me. Actually, it is. And all the lines between what was, I remember when I used to work at the Boston Globe, it was like bricks and clicks, and it was like never the twain shall meet. And that doesn't exist anymore. Or if people might think it still does, but it actually doesn't. Everything's blurring, and everyone has to be aware of what everyone's doing and respect it and work together and see where those connection points are if we're all going to move forward and be able to catch those waves when they come and be attentive to these opportunities. So I think it's just, we don't know, a month from now we'll be talking about something else, right? And we're only going to be most ready for it if all of the teams are working. And that comes from leadership, right? It's helping make sure that all the teams are aware of what each other's doing, educated on talking, collaborating, planning, working together.
Yeah, everything. It's hard not to feel like everything's siloed, like all different areas. To your point, and I agree. I think more than ever we need the cross communication, cross training, the collaboration. Agreed. Yeah.
So I was going to say, when you were talking about the social media, it's interesting because, so I work for Brown University Health. My daughter is actually a public health and neuroscience major at Syracuse University. And I've watched her use of social media from when she was like, me fighting her. It's like, no, you shouldn't have it now. And it's funny because she's active, like a lot of college kids, on Snapchat, mostly Snapchat, and TikTok. And she, in the past 2 years, she's graduating this year, she has gotten an LinkedIn profile, and she's pretty active on that. Mostly on it watching stuff. She doesn't really share, but she also, in the last few years, got a Facebook profile. She lurks. kind of like how my EVO mother got an Instagram profile so she could lurk and watch things. Like she learned to comment to everyone's reassured, like on stuff, hi so and so, blah blah blah, love mom. Like, but so for college kids, so in terms of social media, catering like what you post to who's on who's on the platform, like I'm almost 50, I'm on Facebook. I like to read things, and that's what I noticed for a lot of like the Syracuse University parents are as well, commenting and discussing things. And then I know my daughter's like, she's not always on those Facebook pages because they're for the parents, but she watches, and then we'll have a conversation, and she'll mention something that I know was on. I know she's on Facebook, but she doesn't comment on it. So you don't always know who's on there either. Like if they're not,
That's true.
they're
Yeah.
not commenting.
Yes.
She very rarely posts on anything except for TikTok.
Yeah, no, I think that is a great point. I think we can I think as much as the data will tell us.
Yeah, like what they're sharing or what they're commenting on, it doesn't mean that they're not there.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, no, that's a great point. Yep.
To build on to Erica's point about Reddit, which you brought up, like I was thinking that in my head as you were bringing it up. AI loves unbiased opinion, unbiased data. The other thing AI loves, which Drupal is great at, is structured data as well. So that's like what we have kind of in our, this, everyone here kind of has in their back pocket, is that Drupal is actually, I think, going forward, can be at the leading edge of that. But for Reddit, like AI, there's seen statistics out there, and AI will go to Reddit. I think like answers are like in between 60 and 70% of the time, because it sees Reddit as the unbiased opinion compared to like a university website or any other business you're running.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to think about how it's going about getting its answers.
Yes, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Which means we have less control of the message.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I've been really interested in learning more about AI because I and I think it's great that we recently hired a provost for AI, even at the school, and I think again, I think it came so quickly, and I'm very interested to continue to learn about all the ways that AI, from a storytelling and messaging and all of that standpoint, is controlling the narrative, because everyone is, I think certainly students especially, but are using it and getting information from it as in lieu of Google search or things like that. People are using AI in that way. So
We have a talk on that later this afternoon.
I'll be there. Excellent.
All right, I'm gonna cut it off there with that. Let's give her a round of applause. What a wonderful keynote. And great engagement afterwards, too. All right. We just heard great presentation and great questions. Now I'm going to give you all questions. I didn't know I had animations on here. So for this, we're going to do table breakout discussions. I'm going to ask you three to leave this table and join one of the other ones, because the fuller the table, the better. So the way this works, we have 25 minutes for discussions. I'm going to give you questions related to what was just presented, on civic good and stuff like that. And then you can talk with each other. And these are also centered around Drupal as well. And we have about 7 minutes for each question, so that you can have time to discuss it, share ideas. I'll tell you when the new question's up there. I have timers set up. So your first question for civic trust in the web is, in a crisis at institutions, how can or should the website help build trust with the public? What part does Drupal play in this? So I'll start the timer. You can discuss.
I'm going to mold that over while you comment. Is that right? Good. We're starting that way. On the website, emergency lights that spin.
It's good.
Everything.